I'm Susan Van Steenkiste, and I started the Master Gardener class in 2011, but have gardened well before that, but began to learn what I was doing and to appreciate the many resources we have. I'm going to talk about living with weeds, how you can get rid of them, what are your options. As I begin this, I want to reference you back to the IPM website that Ann went over. This is really the crux to the whole program for the most part, because once you can identify it, then it kind of helps you see what you can do about it. It's very well designed reference to help you with weeds and pests too. So it focuses on long-term management, doing the simplest thing first, and then going on to more invasive, probably a little riskier things if you have to. These are all well researched and can provide good information. It's not just what your mother said, your neighbor, or whatever that may or may not worked. Now you have to decide with weeds how much you can live with. You're never really seriously going to get rid of all of them. So you have to think, which ones do I really can't live with, and how can I get rid of them, and which ones there are. Now it's important to know the life cycle and to know which kind they are. For example, annuals tend to spread with roots and seed development. So you want to try and get those early in the spring or keep them mowed or something to that effect. The perennials, they can come in and they're going to come back the next year. So that's where you need to kind of get them pulled up as best you can. Mulching heavily kind of helps reduce that incidence. You have two options: prevention, to keep them from seeding, to keep them from sprouting, to keep them from spreading. Because remember, they either seed, they have deep tap roots or invasive roots that are hard to get rid of, or just what you can do to kill them once they're up. So you have to decide again, how much time do I want to spend working with these weeds as opposed to just enjoying my garden or the things you might want to do. Most of the time, pulling them up by the weeds works, but that doesn't always work 100%. Some of the deep tap roots, like dandelions, for example, that's much more effective. But grasses, you're going to leave always some of the roots, which will propagate and come up. The perennials, if you've identified the weed correctly and you know it's a perennial, wait till the soil is a little moist, ideally first thing in the spring or after you've watered it, and then just grab it and twist it and then pull. That helps get as much of the root as you can. The annual, hot water, or flame, the hot water seems to work, and there are also a myriad of other things, and we'll go over some more of those in a minute. One other option is to mow it frequently, but don't mow it too short, because if it's too short, then that opens up the sunlight. This is the way we really support the weed growth. You know, as Teresa alluded in the beginning, we compact the soil, so they're really the only things that will grow there, and they don't usually, tend to have much water. So please don't overwater. You notice they really proliferate around your water faucet. Also, one thing people think about is rototilling. Well, I'll just till them all up. Well, yes, initially that will help, but it just opens up the seeds and it really doesn't work very well. So we do suggest you avoid that. And don't mow the yards too short. The recommendation is between 4 to 6 inches. Now, to prepare your soil for your garden beds, solarize, and the technique is well explained in many of your different references. You water it well, cover it with thick plastic. Generally, they say with a thick clear plastic, which brings it, kind of heats it up and bakes it. In some areas, I have found that it just doesn't get hot enough, or you don't have the right sunlight to really bake it. So at least reducing the photosynthesis ability kind of helps. But it is a time-consuming process. You need to leave it on for several weeks, months even, to get rid of it. And again, to reiterate about the rototilling, it breaks up the soil, yes, and does look nice and gets rid of them at the moment. But what you've just done is you stirred all those seeds that we've said have been spread out there, and there they have, sunlight, water, whatever. So you really quadrupled your work. The best thing is to plant cover crops if you're not going to plant, or cover it with some mulch or something. Knowing the growth pattern is really essential, and that I refer you back to the IPM website that Ann reviewed with you. The perennials you pull up by the roots, and the annuals you can try and keep from flowering to the most part. Now, I really want to point out this thing. Now, this is your Roundup. Now, if you can see the screen, it says ready to feed, ready to use. It's important to read the label, and it's important to follow the directions. People think, well, I'm just tired of the star thistle. I'm just going to hit this sucker and I'll get rid of it. Well, this is poisonous. If it kills a plant with living tissue, what's it going to do to other plants or your body? So you do need to be careful with those. Some of the things that you can be cautious with is to remember that the Roundup will kill anything that's round. So you do need to respect where you're planting this, and don't try and use that if you have any plants that you're going to eat. So be sure to follow the directions if you feel like you have to use it, but you do have other options. The pre-emergent type of pesticides kills the seeds, but also may affect other plants. It's good for garden paths. Sometimes courtyards and garden paths, there's just no way to get down under and get those roots out. The post-emergent, that targets selective weeds. That's where you need to know whether it's a broadleaf. And again, Roundup kills all of it, and it's very invasive. The most widely used pesticides are glyphosate, dicamba, or 2-D. These are good for poison oak and blackberry, and sometimes those are your only, options to get rid of those. Again, read the label. Be sure what you're using it just on the plant you want to kill. Be sure you wash your hands well after use, and don't use on a cloudy day, or you will kill everything in sight. Use the recommended strength, and that's why they do suggest that you just buy it ready to feed and not worry with diluting it at all. Now, could you live with the weeds? Well, one aspect is they have deep taproot, so they help hold your soil if that's an option. Sometimes they can kind of bring minerals up from the soil to help your other plants. They're beautiful pollinators. For example, dandelions are the first thing that bloom in the spring. And in my garden, I have dandelions everywhere, it seems, but they are there. The bees come to the dandelions, and then my apple trees bloom. So they're all ready. And so it just really works pretty well. So just consider that as a benefit. The erosion control, again, the St. John's wort was planted for erosion control. You see that on the hillsides. So there are some benefits to that. And would you really mind having, a few dandelions here and there in your yard? Why do you have to have a lawn that has just totally one species? Think about that. And also the weeds can sometimes be pollinator supports, as well as bird habitats, insects. So it can support our ecology. You want to mulch heavily, but if you're looking at it around trees, you want to mulch heavily to your drip line to the trees. That means 3 or 4 feet out from the tree, but move it 3 or 4 inches away from the base. It's almost kind of like a little apron around it. Water appropriately. Be sure and check your soil moisture rather than any sort of schedule. And that's one problem with irrigation that you set on a routine basis. I mean, we've had these 100+ days, and so we're probably going to need to water more. And then on the cooler days, we'll water less. Compost once or twice a year. What you want to do is to support your soil health, which helps retain the water and make it healthy and less of an opportunist for weeds. Avoid compacting the soil. We cannot emphasize enough. Loosen the soil when you begin to plant in the spring with a turning fork, not a rototiller. Now, another thing that you can do, or we look at cultural control. Let's get away from the pesticides, I'm sorry. You look at competitive planting. If you plant enough other things, maybe they will crowd it out. You look at barriers. Some of the plants can spread by runners. So if you put a deep barrier down, that will help it. Mulches are your answer to water retention, weeds, everything. So anytime you can mulch it, you do so. There are some cautions with mulches and where you put them and what kind of mulch. And I would refer you to your fire safety council just for more information on that. Drip irrigation is recommended for a lot of the plants like tomatoes and peppers because you water just around that plant and not just everywhere, as with a sprinkler or overhead sprayer, which not only promotes diseases, but waters whatever weeds may be in the neighborhood. We do have a UC guide to healthy lawns to help you with lawn, because sometimes you do need a sprinkler for that. And again, the IPM website has a turf management guide. I would remind you about mulching your trees. We can't forget our beautiful trees. For further information, we have cow weed maps, which is a good site for the location of specific plants. I again can't emphasize enough the IPM website that Ann referred to. Now, most of the lecture we took from Richard Orlando, who was a instructor at Merritt College in Oakland. And he wrote a book on weeds in the urban landscape because he couldn't find anything about weeds in urban landscape either. Most of your information he found was for agriculture with large crops, and that just wasn't helpful to the urban landscaper. Now I have some tools to help show you exactly what we were talking about. I think I have them listed. Do you have them listed? Okay. Now this is a deep kind of prong looking thing. This works well for deep rooted plants. Again, Ann mentioned, know your plant, know what's going to work. Like for dandelions, things like that. It really gets in there and gets them out. This is called a hori knife. It's Japanese made. And again, it works well to get these deep tap roots into things that you can't get. Nice features, it has a serrated edge here and then this prong right here. My favorite thing for weeding and also garden implements is this trencher kind of digger thing. I honestly can't remember the name of it. You can find it on the internet and probably at some of your local nurseries too. But this allows you to get in and pull up. And this works really, really well for grasses. Because you want to get as much of the root as you can. And this is about the best thing for that. You also can't forget just your faithful trowel, which works for any number of things. So these are some other references. And then the cow weed maps was a new site that we just added, which gives you a good site for locations of specific weeds so you have a better idea of what you're dealing with to help you eradicate it or decide you want to live with it. Now, this is the end of our presentation, and I want to remind you about the chat room, and I hope you've learned through this presentation how we get the weeds, and thank you, Teresa. You've done a wonderful job researching that one, and just why we have the weeds that we do, and went over just kind of identifying them and helping you understand what their utility was in the different family. And I hope I've helped you understand some options for eradicating, minimizing, controlling, learning to live with it. So we hope we've opened your mind to different aspects of weeds so that you truly can see weeds as the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. And I'm going to leave the program now, and I'm going to turn it over to our host, Sylvia or Lisa, and help with the chat. And we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I loved all the information. I've heard so much of this before, and it's the best review, and I thank you so much. I only have a couple questions. One is a comment, and it's from Lorinda. She's asking or telling us that for 10 years gardening, she's used purslane as food and a mulch in her family 3 generations now, and she's done extensive research and can't really determine if it's depleting anything from the soil. So she has kept it in place, and while it's not desired by standard information out there, she's had good results and always surprises gardeners when they see it growing in her yard. So that's a comment from Lorinda about purslane.
Loretta, I really appreciate you sharing that information with us, because indeed purslane is grown as a salad herb in Mediterranean countries and eaten very widely. It does have kind of a citrusy tart taste. I do have some permaculture master gardener friends who leave it and use it and eat it. Now, we can't really exactly go into much detail about the nutritional aspect of it, but it is a pretty ground cover and is sold commercially for use in hanging baskets, ground covers. So I appreciate your comment about the utility of purslane. We put it in the weed category just to illustrate the invasiveness of it, but then also on the other hand, when we're pointing out the good aspects, to share your point about, yes, it's really attractive, it is edible, it works to suppress other weeds. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, that's really good information. Thank you, Susan. I just one other question from Bernadette, and she's asking about a low spreading brown weed that looks like clover, and she's curious what it looks, what we think it is and how she would eradicate that weed.
My guess would be oxalis. What do you, or wood sorrel? Teresa?
Mine too. Oxalis.
And how do you get rid of it?
Mine as well, and I did answer that to Bernadette, but I didn't want to exclude anyone else because it is a good question for sure. And when it starts spreading in my yard, just as an aside, its new growth is green and it will have a yellow flower. And in my case, pulling it out right away when it's light green and young is just so much more effective. It comes out pretty easily. I use Hori Hori, which is my favorite tool. But once it turns brown, like Bernadette is describing, it is much harder to get rid of.
Hori Hori.
Yeah, that's my Hori Hori. I wear it on a belt. I'm such a nerd, but I love my Hori Hori.
Yeah, these Japanese have come up with some really cool weeding tools. I must credit them.
I agree. And mine's lasted for 30 years. So it's my favorite tool. But yes, I think the clover looking weed is oxalis or wood sorrel, and it takes over in my yard with sun. And really, for me, getting rid of it when it's still green has been the most effective. How about you?
And I think also, Bernadette, there may be a pest note. I neglected to mention on the IPM site that there are downloadable pest notes that you can print out to control different pests. And I'm not sure if oxalis is one of them, but I would encourage you, if you have internet capability, to go and go to the IPM site and look for the oxalis on there and see if that, first of all, if that is the plant you're looking at, that's a problem in your yard. And if it's not, then there might be a different strategy for managing it. But thank you for the question. Those are both good comments and questions.
I agree. I don't have anything else. I have people typing in and chatting with me telling us thank you and thank you so much. They always love our workshops. So that was good feedback. We sure appreciate it. And then I'll hand it back over to Sylvia for our closing.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Anne, Susan, and Teresa. That was terrific. So thank you everyone out there who joined us this morning for your interest in the Master Gardeners of Nevada County and our programs. I don't think I can overstate how happy we are to be back hosting our public workshops.